Welcome to our 10th session of our community of practice for Schoolyard Forests. My name is Mikaela Randolph. I serve as the Associate Director of Regional Programs here with Green Schoolyards America. I am based in Los Angeles, California, and I am really excited to welcome you all here. I just want to remind folks that the community of practice aims to be a collegial space where we get to learn and hear about from a diversity of perspectives on how Schoolyard Forest is taking place in different geographies and also different stages across the country. We aim to be a space where folks learn, but are also inspired by the presentations that you hear. So as I said, my name is Mikaela Randolph. I'm the Associate Director of Regional Programs here. I'm joined by my amazing colleagues and being supported by my amazing colleagues, Lauren McKenna, who's our Senior Program Manager, and Allison Torres, our Operations Manager here at Green Schoolyards America. You may also see some other Green Schoolyards America staffers in the chat, and we're all here to be a support and learn from our amazing speakers and each other and provide resources and perspectives as appropriate. So I've already welcomed and introduced, done some introductions. We'll be have a presentation by our guest speakers, who I'll introduce momentarily. And we're also aiming to, as time permits, engage in some discussion with our speakers and other attendees that are in this space. And just a reminder, this community of practice is part of the National Schoolyard Forest System, which is a large-scale initiative to increase tree canopy on public school grounds across the United States to directly shade and protect pre-K through 12 students from extreme heat and rising temperatures due to climate change. California is the first state in the National Schoolyard Forest System, but we're also pleased to welcome Nevada and New Mexico in these efforts. And as I said, the community of practice is a free, open space. It is being recorded, and so we encourage you to share the recording with any colleagues that could not join us today. Or if you just are feeling like, you know what, I need to revisit this space because the information was so good, let me grab some popcorn and dive in, then you can also live this community of practice via recording at a later date. So with that, I just want to remind folks, we have some key resources, and we just released our Green Schoolyards America 2023-2024 Impact Report. So we're excited to share that with folks, and you all can see the great work that we've been up to for the last couple of years. And with that, I'm happy to do some introductions of our guest speakers. Today, we are joined by Adam Bienenstock, who is the founder of Bienenstock Natural Playgrounds. He's an amazing speaker. He's an internationally acclaimed designer, researcher, and advocate of nature-based play spaces, and the founder of Bienenstock Natural Playgrounds. He believes that an authentic connection to nature is paramount to a better future for our children, communities, and planet. He is eager to make moves and inspire action. Adam has traveled globally to collaborate on the creation of everything from national parks to outdoor classroom designs, and to speak about topics spanning human health, child development, environmental regeneration, and natural playground design. Adam's expertise in the realm of natural playgrounds is unparalleled. Adam lives and works at the nexus between soil health, education, and ever-expanding field of nature play, his goal being to connect as many children to nature as possible. And joining Adam in conversation is Kristen Niemi, who currently is the Director of Education at Renfrew County District School Board. Prior to her current position, Kristen was the Superintendent of Education at the District School Board Ontario Northeast, also known as DSB 1. And in that role, Kristen partnered with Bienenstock Playgrounds to introduce a number of outdoor classrooms to the school board. And in this initiative, embrace the natural beauty of the northern landscape, creating sensory-rich learning environments that enhance student engagement and development. And throughout her career, Kristen has consistently demonstrated a commitment to student achievement, well-being, and equity. And we're so excited to have both Adam and Kristen join us today. And I will stop sharing screens so that Adam can share his screen. Thank you, Adam and Kristen.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I should start by saying, it's very cool to see there's lots of familiar names through this on this, and I'm excited that I get to work alongside of and speak at a forum that my good friend Sharon Danks was involved with. I'll follow you anywhere, Sharon. You're one of the people who's actually really doing the work, and you surround yourself by people who are really genuinely doing the work. So with that, I want to introduce Kristen Niemi, because she is of that similar soul. Kristen and I met over a project early on in the pandemic. It's funny that you were mentioning that beginning, Mikaela. And I don't know if you remember that moment where every single playground in North America was surrounded in yellow caution tape. That was not a good day. So at that moment, we started to really think about how are we going to push the idea of maybe outdoor classrooms, and that might have to be the approach. If everyone's freaked out about playgrounds, fine, let's go outside, let's teach outside. It was driving me a little bit bonkers, I will admit, and I was like old man yelling at the radio when people would come on and say what you need is better ventilation, and then I would find myself yelling at the television or at the radio saying, where the ventilation is actually really good? Outside. It's awesome there. And yet we were willing to spend as a society unbelievable amounts of time and effort not to go outside, but realistically, we were spending all of that effort on HVAC systems inside to increase ventilation. I remember there was one fantastic story, which was the Toronto District School Board had come out with this huge press release. They were very excited about their whole new plan for increasing ventilation. And it was to take the screws out of the windows that had been screwed shut and open them, which I thought was fantastic. So in the midst of all of that, we met, Kristen and I. And Kristen was the superintendent across Northern Ontario. So Kristen, I don't want to get too much into it. So why were you the first real sort of school board that we met that was really interested in investing fully in this idea of outdoor classrooms at every school?
Thanks, Adam. Happy to be here with this group as well. Feels like I'm among like-minded people. And what we were noticing was that students, our school climate surveys were indicating that our students, we were seeing a decline in student engagement and well-being. Mental health concerns were on the rise. And this was starting before the pandemic, but then was exacerbated by the pandemic. And we just, living in Northern Ontario, the school board spans about from one end to the other, if you were to drive it, 500 kilometers. I don't know what that is in miles. I guess about.
Call it 350.
Yeah, okay. And so very large geographic school board, but with access to nature. It is a way of life up there. And so for the most part, people really value nature and the outdoors. And so we just really believed that we wanted to see our students learning outside more, and for a whole host of reasons, including supporting their mental health, our staff's mental health, but also to support the curriculum. Especially in kindergarten in Ontario, there's a very strong emphasis on inquiry-based learning, and self-regulation is one of the four domains that's assessed. So we just saw a natural fit to focus on kindergarten initially, thinking that we know that those first 6 years are critical in a child's development. And so we made that our focus.
Yeah. So as we'll get into this a little bit more, but as that intervention started, we were identifying not just the physical intervention that was going to make it successful, but what were the other pillars that were going to allow this to be sustainable and encourage more and more teachers to get outside and use this thing, because it's not as simple as just, build it and they will come. Trying to figure out that support. And this is what I've always admired about Green Schoolyards America, is it's this full approach to not just a thing, but the experience of the thing is what matters. So how do we make sure that we're thinking that through? I should have started this way, but I didn't. I'm currently sitting in the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe and Mohawk First Nations. That's where I'm coming to you from. And we are fortunate to work alongside them and on projects in their places where they live, work, learn, and play. And grateful for that connection and their acceptance of us here. Sorry that I didn't do that at the beginning. We also happen to be super weird, but I'll tell you a bit about how we get started. I'm in a World Biosphere Preserve. My entire town is inside of this biosphere, UN designated biosphere preserve. And I grew up here. So originally from Boston. So depending on what's happening in the world at any given time, my American side either apologizes for my Canadian or my Canadian apologizes for my American. So, and it has waxed and waned over the years. I have this philosophy that nothing good happens at any federal level. All of our work is local. All of our work that connects to children and does the really good stuff that's important is local. And I've never met anyone in federal politics that I fully trusted, but I've met the people who actually get stuff done, and that's who I surround myself with. I find this work more hopeful than anything else that I could possibly invest my time in. So hats off to all of you who are still doing this on a daily level. There's nothing like watching these kids play in this stuff to give you faith in humanity. So I'm going to start to show you a few slides, and then we're going to sort of bang around a little bit. And I also would love, so that this doesn't start to feel like that weird thing where your uncle's at the, wedding reception holding attention all the time, and you kind of wish he'd just be quiet so you could actually talk. If you have a question, if there's something you want to talk about, if there's a point that you disagree with or want clarification on, that's the good stuff. That to me is where the learning is. So anything that you see, please put your hand up or add your voice. Okay, I'm going to see if I can actually do this without a glitch. Who knows? If I do this right, there should be a map that appears on the screen.
You got it.
I got a thumbs up. Awesome.
Yeah.
So the reason I put this out there is because we were talking about that sort of what happens at the beginning of the pandemic. At the beginning of the pandemic, when there was all of that caution tape around all of those spaces, and that we were starting to get afraid to go out, and that my wife or I would sort of don our armor and be the brave one that would go out and forage for food to bring back to the family. I still remember those early days. We put out an outdoor classroom for free to anyone who was interested. And the problem that we had was that we had 10,500 people, public schools, childcares actually respond with requests for these. Since that time, we've built about 550. We have about 4,500 public schools who have signed off on contracts with their principals to have outdoor classrooms and forests built there. And we are very interested in how to scale this stuff regionally and who to partner with to do that. So we're on the hunt for scalable models. This was overwhelming. To be perfectly honest, we just looked at each other and went, oh no, what have we done? But it was very exciting to see that this many people actually saw the potential of an outdoor classroom and teaching and learning outside, and that was immediate and real and visceral. And we've been trying to catch up ever since. And we're starting to realize what are the things that are different we have certain clients, what are the things in common that those clients have that that actually makes these things possible? Why are they interested in doing that? What is driving that? So that's social behavior. And I think it comes back to some original stuff that I remember when I was a kid. This was what I did when I was a kid. This was when I was 8 years old. This was my favorite thing. I happened to, like I already told you, I happened to be the privileged person that grew up in this biosphere preserve. I was up the creek, which was in behind the house. I was just speaking with someone who's doing research out of Africa, who shows different images of different types of environments to see what people think of as their favorite. And what was interesting to me is that over and over again, it comes back to riparian buffer, regardless of where you are in the world, because that's where life began for humanity. That is where the materials to make things were. That's where the canopy was, and the protection was, and the water was, and the food was, and what we could make our own shelters from. It was that richness and diversity that we could actually venture out from. And today, still, it's what we seek. So I'm going to put it to you, if this was my favorite, think of your favorite when you were, it doesn't have to be this, whatever. I mean, everyone has a favorite. And I'm sure we've all done these exercises. If you're on this call, odds are you've already done this exercise a million times over, so you already know what your answer is going to be. So I don't want to hear from everybody exactly what theirs was, but you can throw up a number. You can come off and use your picture, whatever you like. But for those that are on, by a show of fingers, how many senses of the basic 5 were being hit by the one that you remember? So this is easy for me, and I get to all 5 because I was in there. So it's a pretty, if it's your favorite, then it is pretty unusual to not end up with 4. If you start to think deeply about it, you'll pick off those. And the reason that I asked this question is because it's kind of a trick question. In order for things to be our favorite, they're multi-sensory. They are immersive in some way. And if I think about the way schools are currently teaching, if you want to make information sticky, the way to make it sticky is to combine it with a sensory experience. And if you think about the way classrooms are built inside, they're not sensory spaces. These are spaces that are lacking that sensory input. So without that connection, there is way less likelihood that it's going to stick with you. So that at the end of this, by the way, how many of you even had a classroom in your mind as your favorite place when you were a kid? I can assure you it wasn't any of us. Other quick question would be, like, how many of you had a parent in it? And for those of you who say, yes, that's me, probably fishing. It's something where they were encouraging you to do some sort of risky behavior or some sort of sensory engagement or sucking you in deeper. These are sort of human things that are consistent for us. And we have created a learning environment for those kids where that lack of sensory input changes things. So for me, the reason this is relevant isn't just because of what feels good or what my memory is. It's also kind of what I got stuck into when I was a kid. So my dad, if you were to look him up, is known as the father of mucosal immunology. So long term, I was born in Boston because he was starting a research group at Harvard. And it was all around how touching and feeling the soil, that soil microbiome got through into your gut. What were the vectors for that to load for a healthy gut microbiome and actually to load mucosal in your lung. So lung and gut mucosa. And so dinner time for us, after coming in from 8 hours outside in this mess, our hands covered in muck, we were that weird family where I was not allowed to wash my hands before dinner. That was my strange normal. I can just imagine what that would do if we made that rule at my house with my friend, my kids' friends. They'd lose their minds. Like, and all of my friends thought that my parents were weird. I'll admit they were a bit weird. But that piece of that was always a part of the conversation. And if we start to look at those experiences from an early years perspective and all the way through, we're just seeing this. I love that there's an actual product you can buy that's a porta potty with an iPad connected to it. It's so awesomely wrong that I had to put it up there. And I know that the kid on the top right, I feel like he bullied me when I was a kid. I'm just saying. Anyway, sorry. These are those experiences that we're on the hunt for, these sensory things. So our approach to an outdoor classroom or an outdoor learning environment is if there is nothing there that is alive, that you can't find those things and touch those things, it's also not very good for your kids. So we avoid petrochemical soup as a base for this. And that means artificial turf, and that means rubber, that means asphalt. These things are actually going to do a couple of big ones. The big one is they're actually off-gassing at each one at some significant level that's causing problems for brain function and long-term growth and the connection of those synapses. And there's a ton of stuff that comes with that. But more importantly for me, when it comes back to my father's work, when they're touching this, it's not changing their gut microbiome and it's not affecting the way they feel. So my father's work actually was not just about how you get those microbiomes to work, but what they do once they're functioning properly. And that correct function changes the way you think and changes the way you feel. When he figured out that in the soil, in a living soil microbiome in that community, when he figured out that that actually changed, had a better effect on PTSD than any of the current drug formulations, he was very quickly dropped as an immunology researcher by all the pharmaceutical companies. They were not very interested, it turns out, in not being able to have some sort of drug or something that could come out of the research they were funding. And he was saying that a healthy soil microbiome, that community of bugs, was better, and he could prove this. And he tracked on a molecular level and a cellular level exactly what was happening. He was able to isolate that our vagus nerve, our nervous system, was not conveying that conversation to your brain and changing the way you feel and actually changing your empathy scores, dropping your stress and anxiety scores. He was able to prove that that was happening because of these bugs communicating to one another all the way through your system. So he became funded by the US Army, and that was his lead sponsor because they were very interested in this work, that it turns out that you can have an environmental solution to PTSD and stress and anxiety. And it has become more relevant now. And I put this to you because as one of the bases of improved behaviors when we're doing this work and we're creating these environments is all coming back to this living soil microbiome. So more and more of our work on the horticultural side isn't just how can we make it pretty, how can we allow people to gather, what do the benches look like, but how do we have a healthy soil microbiome that can resist the environment that we're in? How can we plant communities of trees and shrubs, not individuals, but communities of trees and shrubs that interact with one another, whose roots support that healthy microbiome, that allows that rich interaction between children and the environment that we know is affecting them on an immunological level, beyond just the idea of this being healthy for the environment. So these things become important. Oh, you don't know this, by the way, but that's my younger son, Leo. He's invisible right now. You can't see him. He has told me he is mulch. So you can't see him at all. Now, I have never seen a kid say, I am asphalt. That's not a thing. So, and that's actually important because part of what we're trying to do is spark imagination. And if you don't have those senses fired up, you lose score on those imaginative markers, on those cognitive markers. We reduce those by actually having it all be one surface. So we're looking to have those natural surfaces as part of this so that we can actually fully engage their senses and their imagination is sparked. It is the one opportunity you have more so than you can ever pull off indoors. You can do this outdoors in these classroom spaces. So some of that is about turning things over. We would have to turn these back over every time. So I know loose parts can be a bit of an issue. It depends on which school you're in. Wherever we can, we're trying to figure out how to add pieces to the puzzle that allow people to pick at it and find things and flip it over. A lot of times we're coming back and flipping them back. There's lots of data. I'm not going to go through all of this. You've heard this stuff and seen this stuff a million times before, I am sure. My favorite one of these right now is the work around ADHD and the diagnosis of it. Some of the more recent papers around this are showing that 72% of the cases that have ADHD, where that's been diagnosed, outside in a nature-rich, a sensory-rich environment, is going to actually turn the clock back on that. So in 72% of the cases, it's an environmental issue. I'm not saying that ADHD doesn't count. I'm just saying we're not making it any better. And we're actually having a lot of cases that have nothing to do with whether or not there is physically a problem with that child beyond that lack of sensory input and sensory integration. What goes along with that stat and marries to it is that currently the highest rising category of disability in the US is sensory integration, autism, Asperger's, and these things come back to the deficit in sensory engagement from the beginning. So it's super important, not just because it's green or because it captures carbon or it reduces heat island effect, which for me are hyper important, but for the schools that we work with, the change in their behaviors is a key reason that they're interested in doing this. It goes well beyond the canopy or the reduction of heat island and fire resistance. And yet we see crazy stuff constantly that is awful. I love that the sensory engagement in this is actually the smell from the dumpster in the background. It is like the ultimate really bad thing. And my dad would have told you, by the way, that this isn't fooling your immune system at all. The plastic versions of this doesn't do the trick. And the idea that you can sort of separate yourselves from it and make things look like nature isn't cool at all. So you're really, again, you can't accept that this is okay. I think it's hilarious, but things that look like nature do not have this effect. And the biggest problem with this stuff is that if it's not, real, that elephant is only an elephant, and that is it. I don't want to get into what you are if you're going down the chute, but you need a chance to actually be fully immersed in the natural experience. So a lot of times, as simple as having a piece that is not, this is ecological restoration that we do. And an ecological restoration piece in each of the classrooms is a classroom in itself. Everyone will have a different version of what they see when they see these things. Some people see a Chinese dragon. I see a schnauzer. I can't get schnauzer out of my head. That's all I got. So everyone's got a different one. I'm sure. I don't know. What else did we get on that one? Yeah, but Chinese dragon makes sense to me. Schnauzer. If I did this for a injury prevention clinic or injury prevention association annual general meeting, I gave a talk about this, and someone yelled from the back, "What do you see?" I said, "What do you see when you see this?" He said, "Splinters." He said, and it's like, some of this stuff is exhausting. Lawsuits for splinters, just for what it's worth, are almost completely non-existent. This is the rarest of the rare, and it has to be some crazy shard sticking out in order to actually make it to that point. And so I think we have to start to talk about compared to what. So if you do this, okay, sure, I'll get it. There's a risk of a splinter. I'm willing to nod my head to this. If you don't do this, what are the risks to the health of that child? So if you do nothing, what happens? And if you do nothing, the risks are exponentially worse, exponentially more damaging. So when we're having our conversations with schools and they mention this thing, we have to say it's not compared to zero. It has to be compared to what the stats are if we do nothing. And I put it to you, it's important to have that frame of mind as you move forward through this and have your conversations with parents. The natural forms, that riparian buffer, is what we base our work upon. Oh, I'm sorry, just got the schnauzer in there by accident. So when we're thinking about these, this is a grove of trees that we planted at a school. This is now 10 years from the original intervention. 30% of the trees that we planted when we started have actually been removed now. The reason that we overplant to that degree in our practice is because I know when I have 1,000 kids at this school, if I've overplanted some of those trees, still looking for multi-stemmed shrubs or single-stem trees, so that there's canopy. When I've planted this way, I can get a soil microbiome that's alive, and I can get a canopy that is complete. And knowing that I'm going to have to remove some of those trees in the next 3-4 years is better than knowing that they're all going to be dead when I plant one. Because that single tree gets what we're calling much loved tree syndrome, which is that every single kid is hauling on that tree and stomping that set of roots. So there is a minimum footprint that we like to talk about with our schools that we collaborate with. Most of the schools end up looking like this when we start. This is a play-based intervention, but it's an outdoor learning environment. You can see the roof line of that fort. This is what that looks like 3 months later. We don't look at these spaces. We like to have some bigger trees that we can do. Some of these interventions cost too much. We have examples where we've done it much smaller, but 30% of the trees, whenever we can, being big enough that they can actually be messed with by the children as part of that intervention. This is one that we're kind of proud of. We won some big awards in the US. This is out of Holland, Michigan. Everything in the kitchen sink, so proud. I just want to put it out to you that when we did this work, gazebos that protected the trees so that we were able to grow through the center of that structure. When we did this and we went back to those students and showed them a picture like this of their space, obviously this is an expensive full-on intervention. We asked the kids always 6 months later, so what do you think? What's your favorite place? And we showed them this, and more than half of them said the best place in this picture is in the forest behind everything that you did. That's exactly the right response. So all of these fancy things that we do, and I make a living doing these fancy things, are not as important as the environment that they're in. So super important to understand the value of those trees when we're looking at how we create these interventions. And that at our best, those environments are rich and wobbly, and there's places to hide and tuck in, and there's proper canopy, and there is a living soil microbiome, and those places are the ones that have the best reaction from the children and are their favorite places and are the storied places that they come back to you with. It is very difficult to go from scratch to that forest at speed. So again, thinking about what your minimum footprint is becomes important.
Adam, you have a couple of questions regarding that picture. That's
Let's
serving
go.
inspiration. Chad asked, what was the cost of the intervention? And where is the school located? Is a public or private school?
So this is a public child care facility on a nature preserve in Holland, Michigan. The sponsorship came from Herman Miller, which is a furniture manufacturer in that area, who works with wood. Bent wood is their thing. And they happen to be the organization. Our first meeting, we were actually brought in by one of the original owners of the furniture manufacturer saying we have to do more here. This intervention in the lower portion of the picture, that was a lot of money, I think, for something like this, but it was part of a capital campaign for a new building for this in their nature preserve. So I'm pretty sure the intervention was about 320,000 for this. What was interesting about this is a first piece that they put in is that they now have, they were the lineup of people who wanted to get into this, which was sponsored and open to the public, was big enough that they now have 9 different childcare facilities across Holland, Michigan. So the community embraced it enough that the community needed more. And each time they open, there is another wait list and another wait list. And each time they do it, it is less and less manipulated like this and more forest. And now those forests are starting to be built out in each of the other communities. Or each of the other areas around town. And you can see how it's influencing the private childcare side, because on that side, they're like, oh, now we got up our game because this is what people are seeking out. So this was the beginning of a piece that started to cycle through. So if you look at Holland, Michigan, it is now one of those places. In fact, the charity that runs this and the Outdoor Discovery Center there now does these installations for other childcares. They've started up their own division for designing and building these types of spaces as well. Worth a look. Hope that answered the question. Is there anything else?
That's all I see for now.
Okay. Couple of things worth taking a look at. I already talked to you about the soil microbiome. I'm going to sort of flip through a little bit, but because of all of the people being worried about risks of injury in our spaces and what that liability might look like, I'm a fairly pragmatic person. So my thoughts were, okay, well, we'll just go ahead and do the systematic lit review. So we got together with a bunch of people from around the world, did a systematic lit review on outdoor risky play. We started to get some data back that is showing that anywhere between 16 and 39 times lower hospital visits are happening when your senses are engaged in these environments when compared to plastic and steel and rubber or asphalt. So, Kristen, I'm going to put it to you. You did this intervention across the entire school board. Do you have any memory of how the resistance was from the school board's perspective when we were doing this this entire and was any of that to do with injury rates? Was there fear around this?
There was a little bit, but what we did was we were proactive and involved both our health and safety and facilities departments right from the beginning and ensured that they were a part of the process and that we shared the research with them as well. But for the most part, there was such a demand and a need that they wanted to support.
Yeah, and I think you were also unusual. What I liked was we did a lot of these interventions in Canada and the U.S. and everywhere we went across North America, except Kristen, your group, we're saying, well, what are you going to do in the rain? What are you going to do in the snow? What are you going to do in the adverse weather? And so we were at your kids were going out at -20. That was totally normal. And it was hilarious to us that the only place that had bought in fully was where it was regularly -20 and filled with snow. We actually got so annoyed by this when we were talking, like, because you didn't seem to care.
No, well, a lot of educators up north just have, there's this saying that there's no such thing as bad weather, there's just bad clothing. And we outfitted every kindergarten classroom with Muddy Buddy suits, one for every child across all of kindergarten in the whole district. And they just put them right over their snow pants so they stay dry and it, shields them from the wind a little bit. We do have some policies around wind chill and things like that, but for the most part, rain, shine, snow, we wanted our students learning outside.
So what was the policy? What was the coldest it was allowed to be?
Well, the recess policy in a lot of Ontario school boards is minus 25 degrees Celsius. So if it's minus 25 or colder, including the wind, then people stay inside.
So so that's the same in Fahrenheit, by the way. Minus
Oh, okay.
25, it's 25.
Okay.
It's a
Good
good
to
mark.
know.
The reason I put this out, and I know that there's a lot of people here who are from a much warmer climate than this, that piece around weather really started to bother me. So everywhere we went, the temperature that people would say, well, it can't be below this with wind chill or else. So we started to go school board by school board to figure out what the coldest it was allowed to be was in order to prevent people where, okay, you can't go out if it's that cold. And we got to Arizona and it was 52 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's, for your sake, Kristen, that's plus 10, 8. So we have designed systems around convenience for teachers about what you're comfortable with, not about what's practical for students and what they need. These temperature policies were designed to make it easier. We don't go out in the rain because it's too messy and it's too wet, and there is nothing about that the kid wouldn't enjoy. The opportunity to learn when it's raining goes up. This is free loose parts. This is awesome. This is life itself. And we don't melt, by the way. There's a whole thing. Like, it turns out we don't melt at all in the rain. So in those moments, now, so what we really need is shade from the hottest sun, the living soil microbiome, and we have to figure out where the water is going to flow. And if we do those things, then these things actually become sustainable. And it's the same three things. It doesn't matter if we're way up north or way down south. These are the same three things that we need.
Adam, you have a question about where where do you source these large chunks of wood?
So what's interesting about that is that everywhere we've gone, and including California, I'll show you some images of some stuff in California that we did as well. One of the best resources is all the local arborists. So working with local arborists when we're looking for this stuff, this is waste wood. This is stuff that's going to be either split into firewood or um, made into mulch. And we look at the opportunity to do this work as, okay, we can capture that carbon for longer if we treat it a certain way and install it this way. It can hang on to that carbon for longer than if we push it down as firewood or push it out as mulch or soil amendments to release its carbon faster. So these interventions allow us to actually slow down that release. And using wood from folks locally is our preferred way. You know, that said, anything that we're doing that might be a farmed, logged thing, we'd never touch first growth. We wouldn't touch second growth at this stage. It's third growth farmed wood that we're working with if it's getting into a manufacturer of some of these specific things. The big couch, that was a piece that was coming down probably about 10 miles away. And we're at the point now where arborists in every city where we work, we have a network of them, and they will call us because we'll pay them for those pieces. And it's just added revenue for them to be able to pull those out of, and they don't have to process them anymore. They don't have to chop them up and split them up and move them. We'll go and pick them up. Little tip on how to pick up these big chunks of wood. You know, the car carriers where they drag the car onto the flat deck. Any tow company, you can tie off on one of these logs and they'll just drag it onto the flat deck, and they'll drop it off anywhere you want it. So they don't need a crane, you don't need a machine, you don't need any of that stuff. You can move it on a little car carrier. So often we'll be doing that from local forestry, city forestry groups. There's always stuff comes down. We're at the point where the arborists know exactly what species and shapes we want. So they'll just call us and say, "You gave me $500 last time."
Thank you, Adam. There's a couple of other questions, like Julia from Cal Fire is asking who takes on the responsibility and liability of moving the logs from the tree removal site and placing it in its final resting place at the school.
Yep.
So there's some concerns sometimes around that.
Oh yeah, fair enough. So for us, that's us. So that's one of the roles that we take. So we cover all of the liabilities of moving any of this stuff when we're involved in a project. Often we'll have a sub that will do that work on the ground, and then we'll provide that coverage for them to do that if we're involved in the project in some way. You should know that we built 4,500 of these spaces plus now. We're well over 150,000 trees that we've installed. We have not had a single claim of injury against us ever in our entire history, or that many. We have been part of the systematic lit review on outdoor risky play because we want to know what those liabilities actually are. And it turns out there's a couple of rules. So the ones that you should feel comfortable about are the things that are under 3 feet off the ground. Those injury rates that are coming from those things, we're not seeing a statistical jump in hospital visits from those furnishings and those pieces that you're looking at in this picture when compared to doing nothing at all or having straight asphalt. There isn't a bump in those hospital visits. So we work hard at creating really good, engaging play opportunities. I mean, the stuff behind you, Lauren, when I look at the one behind you or one behind Kristen, we know that those are classrooms for a portion of the time. Most of the time is kids playing a game where they're jumping from that one to that one and moving across that. I'm very comfortable with the liability around that intervention because I know that the injury rates aren't increasing. There are certain little things that we would stick to around the rules, but those liabilities are remarkably low. So when we're involved, at this point, we're our own anomaly in the stats when it comes to insurance. It's very difficult for people to get insurance doing this work. We've been at it since, I had hair and abs. Two things I have given up on, by the way. But because we've been around that long, we were in on that game and are insured for all of this stuff. And our insurer is very comfortable with that liability, whether it's in Canada or
Mm.
There's this one. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Mikaela.
Sorry, there's this one question we missed, and I know we're about 10 minutes before concluding, but there's a question around treating the wood. Is the wood treated at all for the natural products?
Right. So your biggest, so the biggest things are species choice. The next biggest thing is drainage. The next biggest thing is sealing the ends. So those three things are what give you longevity. So at one point we were, believe it or not, putting hockey pucks under things that were just sitting on the ground because that gave us the exact right amount of space between it and the ground below it that we could have airflow, and that increased its viability. So those are the treatments. In terms of the cambium or the outside edge of them, we're not treating them at all. If we mill it, we will treat it. But the ends, you're keeping them from, remember xylem and phloem way back when? I don't know, was that grade 5? I don't know, something like that. Capillary action is driving the water at the ends, and that's what starts to blow those ends up. So as it evaporates, it expands and the ends blow up. So painting that and sealing that on a regular basis, especially for the first 2 years while those logs are curing, will cut most of the big issues that you're facing with the installations. So I want to talk about a couple of things. I'm going to leave it on this one for a bit. And this comes back to some of the conversation that I've had with Kristen, knowing that I have 10 minutes. We have 10 minutes left. Kristen, we're talking about a lot about the stuff of this. What were the other pieces that made this sustainable when people started to really engage and use this?
Mm-hmm.
What were the difference makers for your team?
Well, for our district, certainly having a vision from centrally across all schools was really important. So we sort of had this beautiful combination of passionate educators at the school level and then support at the central level. And that support took on a variety of different forms. One was we had a team of central teachers, coaches who would support educators in their schools in learning how to use the spaces. So they were going into classrooms, outside with students, co-teaching, co-planning lessons, providing resources. So how to teach literacy and numeracy outside, how to, bring science outside, etc. So we had the coaches, but what we also did was we had support from experts. And so Adam's wife, Jill, is an early childhood educator, has an amazing background in all of this. And so she would come in and work with our educators, job embedded professional learning. So not a conference, not a meeting, but coming into the school, and she's with the teacher, the ECE and the students in the space, and they are delivering lessons together and learning about how to use loose parts with the students, how to spark the curiosity. And so that was really important. So we had this combination of experts coming in to facilitate the learning, and specifically Jill. And then in between that, our staff, our central staff, were supporting and keeping the learning going through the provision of resources and being in the schools supporting.
Yeah, I mean, so and I think the key to this was you understood that mentorship model was a critical piece of the puzzle. So
Yeah.
we weren't just, it wasn't about, PD days where we were going out doing professional development with a group of teachers offsite, where everyone had a nice time. We did a couple of activities. It's kind of like a team building thing. And it's lots of fun, but everyone was going back and teaching exactly the same way they did before the professional development. And a lot of the conversations from those teachers was, that was great. Thanks for the professional development offsite, but you don't understand. If I put Susan and Johnny out into this environment, Johnny's going to hit Susan with a stick, and I can't handle that. That's like this thing. So you don't get my kids. So by doing this in situ, and by actually taking those kids with that teacher and showing them really how this works and teaching a class with them so they can observe and see this go. And they're like, this is amazing. Turns out that Johnny's actually really cool outside. Actually, he's even better than he was when he's inside. So having that sort of docent approach, that mentorship piece, is a key piece. And I'll talk to you quickly about the 4 things that we see that are really important as we're getting to the end of the session. First one, we believe that if you're going to teach about the environment, the kids need access to one. Pretty simple. It's kind of a duh, but it's real. So that for these children means, for these students, means a forest that they can have access to, not one like, your research has proven, where all those trees are covering parking lots or the sidewalk outside of the fence, but one where those trees are available to touch and feel and play and learn under. That's for us, number 1 is that piece. From that, we get living soil microbiome, we get gut microbiome, we get reduced anxiety, and we also get carbon capture, because it turns out that community of bugs does 65% of the carbon capture in the soil, not the leaves on the tree. The living soil microbiome underground is the thing that's doing that carbon capture more than the leaves on the tree. It also gives you the drought resistance. That living soil microbiome gives you the drought resistance and gives me a 65% increase in the viability of those plants as the droughts come through. So that forest, and doing that thoughtfully, matters first. Second, we only want that out. I could say this: environmental outdoor learning does not need a classroom to be great. But for 97% of the teachers that we have interacted with, they need some hook that is familiar so that they can teach the same way they did inside before they venture into the forest. They need some way to not have this be one more thing that they need to do, but just an easy thing to slide into as part of their practice. And then after that, we can do the mentorship and linked to curriculum that allows those teachers to actually do a much more deeper learning model around environmental curriculum. we don't start with the curriculum piece. We start with a forest, and then we add in that familiar place. Mentorship is hyper critically important. We believe it takes 2 years of mentorship to start to change the culture of the school. And the curriculum, I'm not interested in writing curriculum. I think we have so much curriculum written already by really people who are much better than us. So we're looking, you're always trying to partner with people who could do that. We only did a few of those sessions with Kristen and her team. And then you somehow had videographers internally and created a whole series of videos and content that was specific to your school and your school board. And you took that mentorship piece on internally, and you had your own docents that learned from it. I think the reason that we had success was as much like a design process and a forest piece as it was, your ability to take that on as a school board, and for you being the weirdo that you are, Kristen, driving that because you were interested in what made you different from some of other superintendents. You were interested in the outcome for the students and teachers more than the asset. That distinction made this successful.
Absolutely. We have to stay focused on student learning and student well-being. And if you put that at the heart of it, it guides the work. And it really isn't just about, as you said, Adam, not just putting in the space, but really supporting a change in mindset and culture around how learning happens and how childhood development happens.
I just want to jump in as we're kind of at the top of the hour and almost at the top of the hour. I know many folks might need to drop off, but we're happy to keep the line open for additional 15 minutes or so, as people might have questions that you might want to unmute and ask Adam directly. Just as a quick reminder, our next community of practice will be April 17th, and it will feature some work happening in Vancouver, Washington. And per usual, we'll send that information out in our follow-up email. So I just wanted to get that plug out for folks that do have to jump off, but we're happy to keep the line open for folks a little bit longer.
Yeah, sir. If there's any questions, that'd be great. Always happy to respond. Some of the stuff we did at Cal Academy, Mikaela, you'll just say if there's a question that pops in.
Sure.
Some of the work that we did at Cal Academy in San Francisco, we worked along with the Presidio who were taking down the trees there. So their arborist group, when we first met them there, they had brought on a splitter to split up some unbelievable, beautiful pieces. And now that's actually being provided through the Nature Action Collaborative. That's I think it's called, I can't remember the name. Anyway, that's out there. So this was work with Scott Sampson and his team on their site to create outdoor classrooms amongst the forest that existed. It's an unbelievably beautiful resource that you get to work within, working with them. So if you want one that I think is cool, that's probably the nicest thing that we've been involved in out there. It's nice because it's a supervised environment. It's a closed, walled off space. So it's actually very easy to take risks in a space like this. In that case, this actually turned into anyone who's out there, this is a night spot on Thursday evenings where you go and have drinks there. So they turned it into an adult playground after hours. Just some of the pieces that are coming down in California really are amazing. I think over the next little bit too, for what it's worth, as climate change starts to hit, as the weather patterns change, these forests used to be nomadic over millennia. As those climates move, they're not geographically located. They are there tucked into that environment, and they will follow that environment as it flows and moves across North America. And if you look at the maps of specific forests, they would move up and down that map over time as the ice age came down and pushed, and then as it receded. And people, indigenous peoples, were nomadic peoples who moved with those forests. The problem now is that those forests are moving over 2 decades, 1 decade. So it is a very different thing. Our work together to try to think about what is going to be alive in the next 50 years. And some of the pivotal work that you're doing at Green Schoolyards America to identify those lists and to be careful about what we do, that piece is really important. And I'm reminded of it here because more and more of this kind of material is going to become sadly available as that climate changes. So critical to all of us to get to know our arborists and the people who are involved in this, because man, the opportunity to have bits like this that are dropping become a lesson. These dinosaurs that existed before any of us, what a lost opportunity if we're not actually there at the time when it's ready to go. I think Carolyn had a question.
Yes, I have a couple actually, and I put them earlier in the chat. So just going back to the loose parts. So my family is like originally from Germany. My brothers went Waldorf school, so we did a lot of loose parts play. And I wanted to implement that at our school, but I just wanted to sort of look at, would you advise against it? Because you said, I think it was you, Kristen, that we sort of need to teach the teachers how beneficial that could be and how they can get the students to show them how to play with it safely. That was the first part. And then the second part is like, how do we find those mentors to get the teachers engaged? Because I'm a parent at the school, but I'm also playing that role to engage the teachers. And I sort of presented them with like options, how we could really integrate the curriculum into what we're trying to do with the garden. So we're building a butterfly garden and monarch way station, and also a Miwok medicinal plant garden, which totally ties into the curriculum. But as you said earlier, like the teachers are so overwhelmed with what they're doing already that it's really hard for them to sort of make the space for those options.
So part of what you're talking about is loose parts, and part of what you're talking about is culture change. And those two things happen with docents or mentors that can be on your site. So you need to, I don't think there's any way to do them or to uncouple those two. I think your mentors need loose parts in order to be able to get people comfortable to use them. And so you're going to have, I think having them both at the same time is what matters. When we do mentorship on site with people, we bring those loose parts to their sites and then work with those materials with those teachers and with the students so that they can see in real time it's actually not that bad. It actually turns out that you can tune in and step back, as Angela Hanscom says, one of my faves, and not have to fear. There's a thing about loose parts though that's really important, and that is that if you don't have enough, then it becomes competition for those pieces, and you can actually start to increase the adverse behavior by not having enough. So there isn't kind of a little, and by the way, some of that loose part stuff, this can be a conversation, excuse me, this can be a conversation with your facilities manager to not make sure that everything is perfect and cleaned up, and to allow a slightly messier aesthetic. And that conversation should happen early so that they understand what enough can look like. And it might be that use of certain mulches and certain surfacing and the odd ecological restoration log is enough to start that. And then really, we found it much easier to do this in an early childhood setting first, and then we can branch out into the other years. Early childhood, often there's this whole thing, if you're in the, you just mentioned Waldorf, Carolyn. So often on the early childhood side, because there's not reading and writing quite yet, and because that's just developing, social emotional well-being and interaction and the start of those social cues, even learning how to move and how to walk, those require sensory input. There's no way of doing that on a screen effectively. So we tend to see early childhood educators sort of get this a lot better. And it's a lot easier for them to accept this move. And then we use that as an influencer in the first year, grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, and we start to move through the rest of those years. You know, that said, I think for us, the key to it always is an advocate. So there has to be someone who's hyper keen, who really wants it. There has to be a principal who's willing to accept it. Or, you know, when you're lucky, a superintendent who's just thoughtful about it. And I don't recommend really trying to do this until you've managed to get your principal or superintendent to agree that this is a good idea. So that work up front becomes critical.
Carmen is asking specifically, where's this picture taken that we're seeing?
So that one's actually at the Cal Academy
Okay.
in San Francisco.
Okay. It's a really good point that you mentioned about, you know, who to get on board in terms of the principal and the school district, and some of the work that we're leading here with Green Schoolyards America, specifically focused on a leadership institute to support school districts around Schoolyard Forest and getting to 30% tree canopy. And what we're aiming to do is helping, you know, these school district leaders, you know, from facilities, from curriculum and instruction, you know, health, sustainability, like whatever that might look like in a respective district, to develop a vision, you know, for what they might want to see, not just for like one school can definitely serve as like a pilot or an example of like what could possibly take place in
System.
exactly, but really looking at how to shift and scale, you know, shift mentalities and practices, and then scale, you know, what possibly is happening at one school to all the schools within the district, and bring up so many of these salient points that you've made today. If there's a few other questions, we have some time. Thanks for all the folks that have really managed to stay, you know, and engage in this conversation. We really appreciate you all. But if you want to unmute yourselves and ask a question, then, you know, feel free to do that.
I appreciate the fact that anyone is willing to sit through all of this as we get a chance to talk to people that properly get it. You know, this is a good fight to be in. There's so much of the work that's out there that is not hopeful. This is a hopeful fight. This is a good fight. So I just want to put it to you, if you're working on a school, if you're trying to get through to a superintendent, a principal, a teacher, the one thing that has been the most successful approach for us, just to share like the big secret to us having some scale, is a simple question. What's the biggest challenge you're facing today? And to ask and listen to that supervisor, and they will tell you, and I have a solution for that. So I'll put it to you, nature connection is not a problem that we have to solve. It's a solution to the greatest challenge you have today. So if you can get to that superintendent or that teacher and find out what's really bugging them, stress and anxiety, teacher absenteeism, bullying, whatever it is, this is a solution to that issue. So rather than trying to drive our agenda or think that people believe the same thing I believe, I have this crazy idea that if we don't do something for the environment soon, we're not going to have one, and all the other problems are probably moot. That's me. Turns out only 10% of society actually thinks of that as the number one. For me to achieve my goal, I need to find what the number one is for them and provide this as a solution to that problem.
Well, that's sounds like a great way to kind of end this session. If there's any additional questions that folks have, I know there's some resources that are being shared in the chat. Our team is capturing some of those resources, so as we send out our follow-up email, you all can have access to that. So thanks so much for you all that are doing that. Some nature preschool stuff happening in Dallas, maybe that can be supportive of some work that's happening in Houston, Texas, and there's also the Texas Children in Nature Network that maybe you can be connected with for those that are in the chat. So some really good exchanges of information that are coming through, and that's why, and exactly what we want in an environment like this is to recognize that this work is happening across the country and to connect you all with that important work, and also to continue to show opportunities of inspiration and how this work can be done and connect you with meaningful resources. Thank you again to Adam and Kristen for your sharing your perspectives. Feel free to show our speakers some love in the chat or use your reaction button. Happy to, have folks engage in that way. And then I will just share just kind of the last, reminders as we wrap up this session. So again, thank you to our speakers. And I know there's a lot of resources that we have on the Green Schoolyards America website through our Schoolyard Forest System Resource Library. Everything ranging from topics of making the case for the schoolyard forest, so to those key stakeholders like a principal, like a superintendent, like facilities folks or curriculum and instruction. Something that we have found really valuable and important in our work is bringing curriculum and facilities folks in the room together so that they actually have the opportunity to have a conversation, because you can transform a site, but if curriculum and instruction folks don't understand how that fits into their goals that they need to move forward on behalf of the district, then it's like it's all for naught, and vice versa, right? If curriculum and instruction folks are like really on board with this transformation, but the facilities doesn't understand how it fits into their goals and things that they need to move forward, then you need everyone to kind of be bought in on this vision. And so that, just bringing those kind of sides of the house in a school district together are really just an important first step if you haven't done that. But like I was saying, there's a host of resources here on our website that you can connect with, everything from educator resources, design, implementation, maintenance, and obviously this community of practice will continue to be a resource for folks. And like I said previously, our next community of practice will be April 17th, and we'll feature some work from our colleagues in Vancouver, Washington. And thank you all so much again for your time. We're really happy to have you.